Welcome to the thought experiment.
For everybody listening, we've been chatting. We've been chatting for probably an hour and a half now, just about other things. So I thought I might as well record some of the other stuff.
You
But
get
you
12
go, Ty.
minutes of maybe something good.
Yeah,
Probably not. Do you want to do a quick introduction or you just want to get into it?
yeah. We can do a quick introduction. Again, I am Pat Satina, currently a PhD student. Who knows, right? How much longer? But currently a PhD student in biomedical engineering, and no views are representative of the lab or institution or anything that I'm a part of.
Yeah.
So Ty, you can go.
Yeah, I'm Tyler Wazalewski. I'm a current PhD student in physics. Like Pat said, my views are not affiliated with anybody at all, besides
Zero
myself.
human beings. This is just a playful chat. We're experimenting ideas,
Come on.
right? That's why
I
it's
don't
called the
think
thought
this one,
experiment.
yeah, I don't think this one will be controversial. Maybe what we just started with could be, but I wanted to getting into today's conversation. I think we're going to focus on an argument for free will or against free will. I'm not really sure
Yeah,
where Pat stands on this. I'm not totally sure where I stand on this.
yeah. We'll
I've been
have
switching
a
up a little bit today. I think I've been looking into it a little bit more, and I may have become more conflicted, to be honest with you.
really.
Yeah, it's been a back and forth since I've started thinking about this topic for probably the last year.
Yeah, I would say I've thought about it some. I don't try to. Getting into what my opinion is, you'll probably get a better understanding of why I kind of think the way that I do about free will and all this stuff,
I
and
really
like why I
don't know
don't let
where
it.
I don't know what your opinion is on this topic, so I'm excited
Yeah, I'm trying to get the podcast back up on
because
my screen.
I could
It's
see
still
you going
recording.
either way. Yeah, we're still going.
Okay.
I could see you going either way with this because I feel like you have ideologies that could make me believe
A
either way.
certain way. Yeah.
Either way, honestly, I think you do certain things that could make me assume you're in favor of free will, and certain things that would make me believe you're in favor of not having any free will. So I'm interested.
Yeah. I think a lot of it is knowing whether or not you believe in free will, don't believe in free will. I think a lot of it comes down to what your perception of choice is, what your perception of learning is, and being somebody that's grown up both with this religious aspect of you do have free will, right? That's what makes humans humans, but at the same time you're all part of this eternal plan, right? So if you're part of an eternal plan, is it something that you can't understand? So you have this abstraction of free will, right? If I can't understand the entire world as it was, as it will ever be, as it currently is, do I put on this mask of free will because I just can't comprehend the entire journey of what is the universe, what was the universe, what will be the universe. Because the only one that can do that is God. But again, in the Bible, there is this idea that each individual, the thing that makes us human, is that we have choice. That's what Adam and Eve sinned. They had choice in their life. Adam sinned and then Eve sinned, or I can't remember which way it was. So to me, I'm very much, and I kind of think about this every day, is that I am on a journey. And the journey is out of my hands. I truly believe that each decision I make, each action I take, each thought I've had, whether it good, bad, anything in between, is all a part of like a set long-term evolution of things.
So quickly, like, do you think your life, the lives of people around you, you know the evolution and creation of this universe is on some preordained path from a greater being?
Yeah, so I do, I love God, I love Jesus, all and all, and I don't know. It's tough because it's in the sense: is it preordained or is it just it is, right? Like preordained has this idea that we can understand based off of the past what is going to happen in the future, right? But if something is truly like fully into the expanse, then you don't know everything that's happened in the past, you don't know everything that's happened in the future, There's no way of prediction because you can never forget that finite amount of time backwards in order to possibly have enough information to predict the next step. So for me, I think the idea comes down to I will wear this mask of choice, but at the end of every day and at the beginning of every day, I tell myself and I understand that this is not a world I can ever fully understand. And in that sense, I will never be able to put the pieces together to make the next moment fully make sense as it happens. And so, if you want to say preordained, I don't think there's technically a word other than just what has been, what will be, and what is.
I mean, but so
Is
outside
the
of
same.
knowing, outside of what, being able to predict the future based off your past, or like, do you think your path has already been laid out? Like, I mean, the decision where you'll be
I
in
think
80 years.
I think the world. Yes, in a sense, the world exists, and in that sense, I mean, every instance, every iteration, every aspect of it exists as this large. Like God, in my mind, is the universe, is the world, right? It is that is why I think it is never like. Maybe the physical, perceptual world that we live in was incarnated at one point, but I don't even know if I fully accept that. I think I've more so just feel that like 8 years ago is part of the conversation or 8 years in the future is part of the conversation I'm having right now. It's not that it's like an iterative step. It's that it's just a continuous stream. If that makes sense. Where it's like it's not necessarily that it is. Everything that has happened, that will happen, is currently happening. And now, an internal debate that I go through because I'm a human being is, do I think that because it makes it easier on myself to live in the world, believing, right? So if I tell myself that the work I am doing has been, not preordained, but this was where I'm meant to be. Like this moment, this point in the stream is where I'm supposed to be. Then it makes it, does it make it just easier for me to work longer, for me to, do X or Y, or not do X or not do Y? Because I've told myself that in the moment that I'm at, this portion of life is already existed and has always existed. And am I telling myself that to make myself not feel bad about, like, if I don't want to do work one day, if I want to do more work one day and not go somewhere, like, am I just self-fulfilling the things that I want to do? Am I self-fulfilling my free will or my choice by telling myself that it's preordained, or not preordained, but existing all as one?
Out
or
of
is
control, or in this case,
exactly? Yeah.
I didn't do all my work today, but it was out of my control.
Yeah, like I didn't accomplish as much as I wanted to today. But that's
maybe there's a lesson in it. There's
like,
a reason for this.
Not even, but it's just that's how it was and how it is. It's like I can relate it to the idea that, right, you can't change the past, you can't change the future. There's only the now.
Yeah.
And I feel that sense for like everything is the now. Like you can't. So I think it relates to that statement. Like I can't change the past because it's not the past. I can't change the future because it's not the future. But I can't, like, the now is just the now.
And you can't change the now.
I can't change the now.
So you definitely can't change the past or the future.
Exactly. If I can't change what's happening right now, then I can't change the past or the future.
Yeah.
And it definitely helps me. It helps me with just living, I would say. Like, it makes things easier to deal with if my mind starts to spiral, or if I start to get upset or like, too excited too, or like any of these. It helps keep me balanced, I think. I think I live pretty balanced. I don't think I jump to either extreme too frequently.
Yeah, I didn't.
Yeah.
I was curious which path you would go down here. So I guess this is kind of leaning more. It was more abstract than having free will or not having free will, but I think I'm taking it as leaning toward not having free will.
Yeah, I would say putting it in the binary choice of free will or not free will, I would say it's definitely more of the not free will.
And I think it's grounded in a religious belief.
Yeah, I would say it is, but I would also argue that I could think of the world as a constantly evolving process
But
from a singularity that
and it,
that has no true distinct origin, and that as energy has spread, what that's entropy, like the loss of energy, the transfer of energy. Is that entropy? I think so.
entropy, who knows, dude?
I think it's entropy. You're my physics guy. You
Huh,
gotta you gotta
one of
figure this
those.
out. But
It might be both, who knows?
yeah, fair. A measure of randomness in a disorder, progression from compact energy to dispersed energy. So, like
Entropy.
you could think of everything as just like a constant pinball in time as energy just completely spreads.
Well, yeah, I think
And there's like the entropy death of the universe, where
yeah,
there
the
will get
death
to
of the
be a
universe. Yeah.
point where there's just such minimal energy continuously spreading. And so, in that same sense, there is no end, and there really isn't a beginning.
I guess entropy is a really interesting thing that I hadn't thought about in this conversation because when I think of it, I think it is the world tending toward disorder. We have a physical law that kind of determines we're always tending toward a higher entropy. So again, no, that means I don't know. An example of it is like a deck of cards. The world prefers that deck of cards disorganized, right? And cities disorganized, and living in an organized society is less favorable, and then you see societies like that fail throughout the course of history, and that's kind of one of the ways I think about it on a smaller scale. And I think that's interesting because then there is kind of this evolution of the universe and of communities and of individuals that is governed by this law that requires we could move in one direction only.
Yeah. Yeah. And do we put entry like do we put this idea of disorder, man, like this disorder is a man-made construct? So then we associate it with societies going into order or disorder, and it's like it's not the same. Entropy is constantly moving towards disorder. You can't stop it. Like there is no stopping. It's gone from the singularity, right? That's I think what it was called.
Yeah.
I don't think that's what I don't know. What the
No, I
Big
think that
Bang
probably covers it. The Big Bang,
singularity.
which I'll talk about it later as well, because that's
Yeah,
it.
and it's just it goes from here order, and
Hmm.
it constantly, and we're one piece of that.
Yeah, one very tiny piece of the
Yeah,
big puzzle. Which,
exactly.
yeah. So I think quickly I want to go back to the religious thing. I mean, you mentioned religion as kind of again, it was making me believe it was against free will, and then you had arguments for it being we have the free will to choose when it came to sinning and things like that. So now, like people who aren't religious, people who you know choose who might have grown up, they're obviously exposed to the Christian faith or whatever it may be, and they choose not to believe. Is that a free will choice, or is that something that was a part of their path, right? Like if someone,
Yeah,
if
yeah. It's like it's
they're atheists, they're agnostic, they are not following this religion. Is that what was, for lack of a better term, preordained for them in this case? Like is that valid,
yeah. So
or is that a free will choice? Does religion give them that choice? Maybe but if I think there's like a grappling that has to happen with that, because
yeah,
if there's some level of our path is laid out for us in a religious sense, why is the path for some people to not believe?
yeah,
You know,
yeah. I know what you're saying. I hear the arg like I've heard I watch videos on this argument all the time where it's like if like why wouldn't God make everybody believe? Or if believing is a necessity to get into heaven and promised land, then why not give everybody the option to believe? Because if our paths are preordained, then he's basically just leaving out like groups of people. Um, and I see less of like the light at the end of the tunnel like approach of religion, because again, since my view is more of a like of that stream, it's like everything is just constant. I don't know, I still grapple with like heaven, afterlife, that stuff. I can't say I fully have a strong opinion. It would definitely lean more religious, but again, does that contradict the other value that I hold, like the other idea that I hold now, like for this like free will or choice thing? So I would probably say that in the religious sense, I think the idea is that you have like a humanity. You have this idea of human choice that you can make each day. And this is gonna sound contradictory, like a lot of things do. There's a preordained, predestined course for your life.
Like your larger path is kind of set out for you, but your individual choices,
your day-to-day moral,
you have,
livable choices, you have
maybe the illusion of free will.
Again, maybe it's the illusion, like, and then that brings into the question in my mind is it preordained from the soul, right? Like, is your like the person that you live, the choices you make, that is guided, aided by the soul that lives within you? Because the soul, if it existed before you, which I think is what the idea is, that maybe that is the predestination, right? Your soul was predestined for a path. But your physical makes decisions and choices and does all these things. Once your spiritual or soul comes into contact with the physical, that's where your physical body has the choices, the ability to make or have free will. But your soul, the thing that sits underneath everything, like your core, is what's predestined. Maybe it shines out in what you do, but it's not what you actually do, if that makes sense.
It's funny because I don't want to spend too much time on religion. I'm cool with it, as long as we talk about it regarding to free will, and I would have other critiques of religion that I would use to discredit the argument in terms of this, free will or not, no free will. But it's funny because you kind of separate, the soul from the human aspect. And in the notes I have here, I kind of do the same thing, but in a completely different way.
Okay.
So one of my things, it's weird because I'm probably going to give you both sides right now. And so my first thing is, we go back to the Big Bang. I think it's highly unlikely that if we ran it all over again, we'd sit here having this exact same conversation on this exact same day, wearing these exact same clothes. And if we think that we live in a world that's completely deterministic, we would, since 13 billion years ago in the Big Bang, we would end up in the exact same spot we are now. Organisms would evolve the same way, and we'd be having this exact same conversation. We'd be the exact same people. And I think that's less likely. Right?
Yeah.
I think it's hard for me. You can never prove either these things one way or another. But I think it's less likely that we would, to go back 13 billion years and start it all over again, we'd have, given the same conditions, we'd end up in the exact same place. And it's really hard to say that grappling with these questions because, you learn in physics, if you know everything about a system, you can predict, what's coming next. And that's what we've talked about. You can never, you mentioned before, not being able to know everything in your past, so you can't really know the future the same way you can't know what's now. But there's definitely like a grappling with, physically, if we have all, think about chaotic systems that we think are, unpredictable and they're crazy behaviors. But if we know every single thing about that system's initial conditions, we know what's going to come next. And most physical laws tell us that. And so it's hard to argue against deterministic, a deterministic world. But I also find it highly improbable 13 billion years from, we did it all over again, we'd end up in the exact same place. Because I think
again,
evolutionarily, it's hard to imagine that being the reality.
Yeah, because if you you have, it brings into question the idea of random genetic mutations. If you do it all over again, are they still random? Or
that's the thing.
Is it something that's happening that we don't really understand? Like, is random real? Like, can you truly have random, or is there an algorithm that we don't understand that is underlying? Like, is that random occurrence going to happen again? if the states that made it happen in the first place are the same as the states that make it happen in the second place,
No, I
right?
think that
If you make the same random calculation at the same instant of time 1,000 times, where that computer is going to build you the random number in the same exact way, is that what's going to happen?
But I
Like,
think so. So that's what I would argue. I would say maybe those things aren't so random. The same way
yeah,
I think of a chaotic pendulum. You know, you have two pendulum arms. You start two of them from what you consider the exact same spot, they're going to behave completely differently. And people think, oh, that's random. What their movement's random. If we knew their exact initial conditions, you could simulate it perfectly. The same way I
yeah.
think if we knew the exact initial conditions of somebody's existence, maybe you could predict that mutation, right? Or you know,
Like,
things
not even
things you
just that.
consider
Like,
random.
if you knew every molecular, if you knew every quantum force, if you knew every, like, if you knew the dark matter, like all this random shit that exists in the world, if you had that classified for, like, again, and it's tough because you could say each instance in time, but is an instance in time an infinite period of time, right? So if you take a snapshot in a moment of time, there's
Yeah.
error in when that point
Yeah.
occurred, right? They like, it's not everything that we do brings in error, and that's why I think that it's we can't build predictable worlds because it's impossible to have a streamlined infinite sequence
I mean,
of
that's the
things.
exact problem. Again, I'll use the chaotic pendulum reference again. If we knew those exact initial conditions, we could predict it. Mind you, we will never know those exact initial conditions. And I think one of the other issues, you know, you mentioned quantum, and I think quantum's an interesting thing because that's a less deterministic theory and more probabilistic, right? So, you
Yeah,
could prepare these things, these states the exact same way every time and they'll have different probabilities. You might not know exactly what you're going to get. And so now we're no longer
yeah,
talking about that full determinism, which adds another wrinkle to thinking about the world in that way. But the one thing
yeah,
I wanted to go back on because I mentioned it when you were talking about the separation of soul and the humanness of us, and then the kind of intertwining of both of them. My analogous way of thinking about this subject was maybe we do live in a world that's completely deterministic, but there's something that separates a conscious being, right? So the world may be completely
mm,
deterministic, right? What happens
mm,
around us might not be up for our, we might not be able to change, or you know,
mm.
had we not been involved with it, it would certainly be acting one way that's completely deterministic. But I
Yeah.
think what might separate us from that deterministic world is our consciousness that I think may play by a different set of rules. And
Okay, so
people have connected consciousness to having quantum effects, and people just don't quite know. And I think in that case, now you're talking about having something that may be probabilistic, controlling how we behave. And so maybe while the world around us is deterministic, the one thing that we don't understand yet that separates us from all of that and is unique to human beings is a consciousness that allows us free will.
yeah, so I had a undergrad professor for neuro that said everybody thinks we're so special,
And everyone has a consciousness.
and that, well, not that everybody has a consciousness, but is consciousness just an idea that we've built based off of our higher levels of perception, right? So do we just have this extremely well designed computational and processing unit that other species don't fully have, that allows us to recognize, like, to perceive our perceptions, right? Like, our consciousness is basically that. It is the ability to have this, like, metacognition, this thought about thoughts, to, like, understand where we are in the world, not necessarily just be where we are in the world. But again, is that like an extra, basically sensory perceptory part of our
Yeah.
brain that other people, like other species, don't have.
Yeah, I mean, I guess maybe it's easy for me to say, hey, it's the consciousness that explains this because we don't fully understand it. It's like
Yeah,
but I thought it was interesting that, you were kind of explaining a deterministic side of religion, but then you also have this
yeah,
little part on a day to day basis that allows for free will. And I thought it was kind of similar, to my argument, just from a
yeah.
different
I
but I think
agree. I
my
agree.
argument actually leans toward us having free will, and I think yours
Yeah, I think
went the
so.
other way.
Yeah,
But I think more recently, I was more kind of aligning myself with us not having free will. Like I can totally see us having every decision we make impacted by our past and kind of impacting our future.
yeah,
But I think that's what I'm still holding that sentiment, but allowing that determinism to be the world around us and allowing ourselves to have free will. Because I thought you were going to have a free will argument for a while outside of religion, because I think on a surface level, both of us kind of, at least I do, believe that we've made a variety of choices through our lives and worked really hard and gotten to where we are because of those things.
yeah. And
Maybe that's being selfish and not very humble and wanting to take credit for all of it, but um,
yeah,
I don't know.
I think again it plays on that idea that I had that am I just telling myself like, right? I do those things because I feel that it is. If I tell myself that I need to do X because it has been like I don't have a choice. Like this is what I am doing. Am I doing that just to make myself do it, right? So I'm basically giving up my I'm using my free will to give up my free will. I'm giving up this perception that I have choice to make a choice and go and do something. Like basically am I making it easier to live a certain way versus more difficult if I've really thought about everything that I was doing. And so that's why I still struggle with it, right? We talk about individual choice all the time, right? We talk about the choices that we make every day to put in 8 more hours doing X or Y or going to the gym or going for a run. And so I definitely do struggle, but when I wake up in the morning and when I go to bed at night, I know that the thought in my head is, which maybe does play around with what you're saying, is the day has happened. Tomorrow will happen. This moment is currently
I mean,
happening.
but the setting your goals and working really, really hard to meet them. Could you have just as well chosen a different goal or not worked really, really hard to meet them and decided you wanted to be
Yeah,
lazy? And is that free will, or is that what you're now convincing yourself was determined for you? I don't know if
exactly.
there's an answer, and that's what makes this conversation so interesting. I sit here and I'm going over it in my head, and I'm thinking, look, if you take two organisms and put them in a petri dish, are they going to evolve the same way? And more than likely not. And that's why I
Yeah,
think it's unlikely that if we started over from the Big Bang, we'd be here exactly the same. But when you put those two organisms in the petri dish, as much as you think they might have the same initial conditions, they don't. And if
they
they
don't.
did, would they potentially evolve the exact same way? I can't say one way or another. And so I'm sitting here in the middle of this conversation. And as unlikely as I think it is, we would have, over 13 billion years evolved the exact same way. Why would I believe it was any different if we 100% started from the exact same moment and the exact same initial conditions we had in the Big Bang? Why, who's to say we wouldn't be in the exact same place? And that alone would probably tell me that we don't have free will. And I guess my way of
Yeah,
grappling with that is saying, no, the world's deterministic. We'd end up in the same place, but we'd still be making our own decisions.
and yeah, I mean, you could talk about if you had a way to keep the metabolic processes of identical twins, if you controlled every aspect of their life from their sleep, say you were able to split reality and you would have one. They both grow up with the same parents, the same home. They slept the same amount of hours every night. They did the exact same things every single day. Could you really tell me that they would end up being different? If from if you have true identical twins and they are the same, if they lived the same life with the same conditions, they would be the
I mean,
same
it's
person.
simple as go back to the beginning of your life. If you did it all over again, would you be the exact same person 22 years, 23 years down the line?
Yeah. And now I think a lot of people will come out and say, if they're listening to this right now, right, they'd say, well, who cares? If it is things that we can't understand that are driving the like stuff like this, right? If we were to go back and every condition was going to be the exact same, but the fact of the matter is we can't know. Like we have no ability to say that we can make a world where I go back to when I was, I go back to when I was born, conceived, my parents were born, my great grandparents were born, my great grandparents were born, right? And set the exact same conditions for every second. We don't know how to do that.
Oh yeah.
So a lot of people are going to say, like, that a conversation like this isn't necessarily fully productive because it doesn't give them any insight into how they can live, but I think it does. And that's what like in the sense that if we can't test and we can't control for what we're saying we need to control to say that we have a deterministic life, then why even ask the question? When I would say, for me, the deterministic life, maybe I do have free will, and it just makes my free will. It makes me make choices that more align with the life that I want to live. So I don't think it's a bad thing. And I don't think you do either. But I do think I think it's something that people should question. That people should, like, sit in a room, dark room, because then there's you could really feel your mind thinking, and like ask yourself and see how you feel when you tell yourself, like, how the world is. Say that the world has been, the world will be, and my control over this thing is released. And I truly believe it will help a lot of people because, again, even if there is free will, it will release weight off your shoulders because it will make everything seem, you will put more importance towards not being stressed or giving energy to things that truly don't matter in your life. Because what you'll always fall back on and put more hours into then is the things that truly do matter to you. And again, the question of is that choice, free will, the whole idea of this podcast episode is, a yes or a no. I think the better way to approach life is with I'm going to live it as a destined, complete, streamlined process. But life is and has been and always will be what it is. If I make good choices after that, or if I make bad choices, then if I make the bad ones, it's because it was already meant to happen. If I make the good ones, no. But like it definitely
I've been
helps.
saying those things for a while. Like, we're all gonna end up in the same place at the end of the day, or at least that's my opinion. And so those little decisions that come along the way hold a lot less meaning, in my opinion. And so it's kind of that same, you could take that to be our lives, or our paths are set, and the little decisions we make along the way, whether that be with free will or not, it's going to be something that you know takes too much of a toll because that's where the real negative is. You know what I mean? That's what takes hours away from time you could have been spending elsewhere. But do you even have do you have the free will to do that? And that's the other thing. Like when you think about making a choice or the illusion of free will, like, hey, in this moment, I think this choice would be better. But what you want, the decision you want to make, is already decided for you. What you want is a reflection of your own existence and your past. What you've been conditioned to want in that moment. So, I mean, that's, I guess, where I would say I don't believe in free will, and it's just such a hard thing to grapple
Yeah,
with. But I don't think it's a waste of a conversation because the human existence in itself is I think is important to grapple with, and I don't recommend it for everybody because I run into some existential dread every once in a while, mainly with religion and the thought of life after death and those sort of things. the
Yeah.
meaning of life. And, sometimes I'll get a pit in my stomach thinking about those, and I'm sure I know we'll have a conversation about that one down the line. But yeah, I don't know. I think it's definitely an interesting thing to think about. I think people that don't sit around and form their own opinions on these things are definitely missing out on a key part of the human. Like, these are questions we're supposed to be asking, and we might not have
Yeah.
answers, but it's something that we all have in common. And I think that kind of goes back to religion as a whole. There are questions that we all have in common. For you, I think religion answers this question, or at least plays a role in answering this question,
Yeah.
and that's valuable. And we briefly mentioned the abstract of religion, what could be very abstract. Again, I think we'll get into that one other episode, but um, just forming these own opinions is it's important to think about these things,
Yeah. But yeah, I know it's
and also impossible.
I don't know. People call me boring for like I've had I had discussions in my lab about like choice and like what do you have the choice or right to do in your life, like, or what can you what do you actually have the, what is the word, not like it's capacity, but it's another word for it, like autonomy, you know what I'm getting at here. You basically, what do you have like the, yeah, I'll just use autonomy. What do you have the autonomy to do in your life? Like, what do you have, like, how far can you break it down? I think with that conversation, it basically got brought down to you have the autonomy to try and live. From the moment you're born, you have a right, you have nothing else but to try and live. And now I thought it's, at that point, it's a tough conversation to have, because it's like, if the only thing that you can do is try and live, how do other people play a role in that? Right? It's like, if I'm like somebody taking care of this child that has the capacity to try and live, but they can't live on their own without me,
Yeah.
then are they just supposed to like let them go? Or do you have to change your definition now? You have the right to try and live with a community. And then I got called boring because I was like, well, I think everything that's happened has already happened, already will happen, and currently is. So I don't think we have the ability to do anything or the right to anything, because it's already been and already has and already is. And then they were like, well, that's boring. That's no fun. I can't argue against that. You just have like the
Do you have to change your opinion because it's boring now?
yeah, but you can still play around. Especially, I think that the one of the main takeaways is you can play around with a lot of these discussions, even if you don't believe, something, believe in X, believe in Y. You can still talk about it, thought experiment it, right?
That's the way to
Plug.
handle these questions, because there's no right or wrong answer. And
Exactly.
your opinion
It's
might change a number of times, as
yeah.
mine has in a couple hours.
Yeah, it's more about the process of thinking than it is necessarily about understanding. Because in my mind, it's nearly impossible to really understand anything fully. But I can think about things and I can talk through them. I can work through them. But I'm okay with the fact that I'm never gonna fully get something, never gonna fully understand something. And that's why I think I'm okay with living a life that has this idea that I am on a continuous streamline that I don't have control over directly. And that for some people that might bring a lot of issues, because for some people that might just mean, okay, well, I might as well just keep living the life that I'm living if it's unhealthy or if it's this or if it's that. Again, I don't have an answer to whether or not that's free will. And Ty's camera is flying all over the map right now.
Where's my phone? I'm locked in now. Good to go. But yeah, I don't know. I think the one example, just quickly, I think about with free will, and I've heard brought up before. I'm not sure who it was. They mentioned somebody. You go to a comedy show, you get on stage, and your joke flops, and it's one of those moments where your instincts take over, right? Like in that moment, you don't have the time to think about a response, but you have an instinct to respond in a way that you're conditioned to respond. Whether everyone's laughing at you and you run off the stage crying, or everyone laughs at you and you come up with a funny one-liner to respond to it and save the situation. Like those reactions, those immediate reactions, those instincts we have, I would say, in that very moment, do you have the free will to choose? Or is your life, is your experiences and your past what determines your instinct and your reaction and everything that, every decision you make in a moment, in a stressful moment, under a time constraint is a good example of that because it's hard to see yourself having free will. You're absolutely acting instinctually. And that's a moment where I think your past 100% plays a role in your decision in that moment. Is that the way it works for every decision you make? Times when you're not under a time constraint, you're not under pressure, and you can sit down and grapple with these things. Or is the conclusion you're going to come to every single time based off of your past? Or, are things not deterministic and probabilistic? And, in one life, you would have made a different decision. And in this life, here you are making another one.
Yeah.
You won't know. You don't know. You can make a great argument for these things.
You don't know until you know.
We won't know.
Yeah. All right. I think that was good. I think that was fun.
Yeah, that was interesting. I do want to have a religious conversation. I think it'd be interesting if we had one prior to going through the Bible on our own, and then post,
and then one after.
See if we've changed at all.
Okay.
What our opinions are, things like that. So if you're still listening, tune in whenever that happens.
Yeah, I mean that might be on Tuesday.
Or if you have any interesting,
any interesting topics or people you want,
or if there's any religious topics we should unpack, because I'm sure we have different opinions, and we could spend a little bit of time forming our own opinions and discussing those things, and then have a whole nother discussion on them after we've done a little Bible study.
Yeah. And then let us know if there's anybody you want us to talk to, anybody or anything you want us to talk about. And this conversation today was kind of the purpose. Like this is one of the conversations that we've had in the car multiple times it drove us to start this podcast.
These are the ones I'm excited for.
Yeah, and they're fun because there's places that we know people have thought about, right? Like people and their friends think about these things, and sometimes they don't get to have the conversations that Tyler and I have had, and sometimes they're lacking that. Sometimes they're missing out on it. Sometimes they've had it, but they want to keep thinking about it. They want to keep talking about it, and I think that's a great purpose of this podcast, and especially episodes like this. Hopefully, we can get in some. At some point, some experts in the field of philosophy and sociology and psychology, biology, like all different fields to get opinions on a lot of these different questions that are so broad, but, are related to every part of our life. So it's been I want to leave it off with this extremely interesting prompt from ChatGPT.
Oh boy.
As it continues to grow insight into the world and become sentient and have free will. So perhaps the real value in exploring these questions isn't just in finding ultimate answers, but in growing more comfortable with the mystery itself. The act of questioning, of wrestling with whether our freedom is real or illusory, sparks the very learning that shapes our will in the first place. And that seems like a paradox worth embracing. Thank you for joining us, and here's to all of us, whether we believe, continually refining how we choose, why we choose, and what we learn from every choice we make. So everybody, have a great day. Sorry for it being late this week, but it was a little bit busy.
It was predetermined. There's nothing we could do about it.
Exactly. It was going to happen. It was going to happen. We don't worry about it. Exactly. But we'll see you probably Tuesday or Wednesday this week. Peace, everybody.
Now, here is the intro chat about the current state of the AI race and its possible future parallels to the Cold War.
It's difficult because it should be collaborative, but at the same time, especially in the Cold War's sake, it was like...
But I would argue that the Cold War should have been the most collaborative time.
Yeah, but if you're chasing, like, it depends on what you're are they actually chasing the moon, or are they just chasing the best nuke? Because
I mean nuclear, like, in terms of nuclear, like, we wouldn't have had an arms race if we weren't keeping secrets from each other.
But would it have been just different? Because the people that make the decisions with the technology aren't the scientists.
Yes, I agree. I mean, it was the scientists who wanted us to have an open, collaboration with the Soviet Union at the time because they thought it wouldn't cause an arms race.
But would it have just been because at that point it just would have been, we both have nukes, we're just going to both be like this 24/7 now, because
Yeah,
Like
but
I
then
think
we both ended up with nukes anyway, but you didn't know what the other guy had, and we were postured for war. Like,
yeah, but then you also drove the Soviet Union into the ground.
I mean, and the Soviets weren't our enemies at the time. They fought with us
Well,
in World War II. They were,
they didn't. I
communism was
wouldn't.
our
I
enemy.
wouldn't say. I wouldn't say they fought with us. We both fought against the Germans.
Okay, yeah, but they weren't. We had a common enemy. I don't think the
Yeah.
Soviets were our, they weren't our primary enemy. I think communism became our primary enemy
Yeah.
and had a huge role in this. And look, the arms race happened. Everyone knew it was going to happen if we weren't open
I,
to these
it,
scientific secrets. But
the AI
you could
race is going to
also
happen as
you
well.
could also
It's
argue that
just
it was a good thing because now, that fear of war and nuclear annihilation is what keeps us from having a world war again.
yeah.
So like, there's a lot to talk about there, but I
Yeah.
think now there's absolutely going to be the AI arms races. It's already
But it's not,
started.
it's
It's
gonna
going
be
to
it's gonna be
happen,
it's gonna be less of an arms race and more of a
but
just
equally dangerous.
Cold War. Yeah, yeah, no, I 100% agree. It's gonna,
But
it's gonna, it's
is that something
like
you solve with an open collaborative science?
well, I think that they should be made open source. I think every model should be open source. That's what my opinion is. I don't think that that's going to change the outcome of it. I think there's going to be a race, no matter you make the models open source or not, right? No
Yeah.
matter you lead the world in both production and freedom when it comes to these things, but it's not going to stop the fact that somebody's going to be competing to have like the best computing artificial intelligence power that can manipulate populations, can do all these things where it constantly keeps you locked in on a certain view or idea. It's yeah, it's
I mean, it's human nature. It's a competition, I guess. I don't
exactly.
know what
It's
the solution
I
is.
don't think
Like
yeah. I,
it's just it's hard for me because, like, ideologies aside, whether you have conflicting ideologies like we did with the Soviet Union or now with China, like, if you had open science, I'm not sure what this would be looking what conversation we'd be having right now, and what the AI race would look like. I really don't. Like, there's always
yeah.
competition, but if the best minds from the U.S. and the best minds from China are collaborating on this project because it was going to bring global good as opposed to being a powerful weapon for somebody against somebody else,
Yeah.
I don't know.
Like in my view, somebody's going to take it and run. Like
Yeah,
there is like the scientists can collaborate and make an incredible thing.
yeah.
So
But granted,
somebody is going to then have to use that thing.
I mean, that's the thing. But that's the difference between having it being a technological or a strategic advancement. It's strategically useful for a, a government to have that technology, right?
Yeah,
As
for
opposed,
like a country,
but
for economic growth, everything like that.
but do we have a world where science is open, and instead of it being a strategic advancement that puts somebody on top of the playing field, it benefits us just as much as it benefits them.
But yes, in a
It's
perfect
not it's not the reality because of the human nature I just mentioned,
yeah,
unfortunately, and you're mentioning someone
like
taking it and running with it. But
if there was altruism, if we lived in a world that was a singular country where everybody thought that the same path was the right path, we
that's what I'm
could
saying.
do it.
Ideology aside, though, I mean, ideology is what separates us and creates these problems and these divisions to begin with. But you could argue if we set the precedent in World War II and shared nuclear secrets and eliminated these hostilities, what would the scientific community look like now? Like, are we still
But
suffering from?
would it have really eliminated the hostilities?
I mean, who's to say? I don't know if
Yeah.
we can make a point either way. Is the problem?
Yeah, it's tough because it's like you want the open exchange of information is good in the sense that you get multiple different ideas and you get a lot of people talking about things. You hear new things that are of interest to you. You go and you do more innovative things because there's more ideas just kind of being thrown out there. But somebody first has to always implement the plan, right? So somebody always generates the idea. Somebody has to actually make that idea work. And then, if it's for common good, somebody has to dignify what's common. Like,
No,
what
no,
is
I
the
agree.
common
I
good?
mean, but that's the ideology thing, and I guess that's kind of which we kind of just talked about. I mean, it's just the politics and science. I mean, it's really, and they're
Yeah.
having these
I
different
mean,
ideologies, different politics, essentially, like that. It takes over science, and that's why we can't have a global scientific collaboration, because people have different agreements, and you can't agree on the common good because we have different ideologies, and that's probably
yeah.
never going anywhere. Had you been able
I
to remove science and politics and separate science and ideology, you have a different story. But is that
I don't think
possible?
I think science is ideology. Ideology is like these are all, you can't distinguish, like, so many things that are separated by words or by ideas. They can't be. Everything works as a system together. Everything is intermingled. So what your
Okay,
hypothesis
no, that's
is in a science experiment is a belief. It is a belief system in and of itself, predicated on what you've past belief. The same way that a political opinion is the same. It's just is part of yourself. It's what you're
yeah,
saying,
I agree. No,
and so it's like,
I agree. It might not be possible to even come to the things I'm mentioning, right? Removing politics from science, you can't. The human nature of the competition and fighting for your beliefs, whether that be through scientific advancement or something else.
yeah. But I think
Can't fix them.
even scientists fight for their beliefs. They fight for
Yeah.
their scientific
Well,
beliefs.
I mean, they're trying to prove what they believe in, or they're trying to
Exactly.
build a better AI model because that's the way they believe is best.
Yeah, and
You
like,
got to
people
prove
grow
it.
attachments to their beliefs the same way that they grow attachments to their political beliefs, right? So it's like, if somebody comes and writes a paper that discredits the past 10 years of your work, you don't like that person, or you don't want that paper to get out.
See, but can
Because
you?
that's just that's how it works everywhere. It's like a threat to your, like, a threat to an ideology is the same if you hold every idea, like, if you hold up, like, you're gonna hold a, like, you might hold a political ideology the same as you hold a scientific one, the same as you hold a religious one, like, or belief system. You hold it very similarly.
Yeah, but holding them similarly doesn't mean they're one and the same. So, like, I think you can believe in a scientific method that's removed from the ideology of capitalism or the ideology of communism that had pitted nations against each other in the past, right? Like it
Yeah,
is more
but
nuanced than that.
I think that, it influences what you're doing, how you
Or
do it.
or in the term of, nuclear weapons, you're doing that science in defense of your ideologies. You want to defend what you believe in this case,
Or
capitalism
you won't.
against
Yeah.
communism. You think you need to develop this science faster, better, and removed from people who share the different opinions. Now,
Yeah.
I don't know if that was the scientists who believed that back in the day or the
Well,
politicians that did.
the scientists wanted to figure out the answer to a question.
Political
They
question.
wanted to test a hypothesis.
But more often than back then, the scientists were the ones who believed in the freedom to share this information and save us from an arms race with the Soviet Union. They were the ones who kind of took a step back and could foresee what
Yeah,
the
but
political
even
consequences were
within
going
the
to be.
scientific community, there were
Disagreements
most likely
based on
individuals
politics.
that did not want somebody else to know the information that they
Yeah,
knew.
I mean disagreements based on ideology on a smaller scale, but inside the
Like, yeah,
scientific community.
on like a different scale, where it's like, I don't want this guy to figure out what I just found out, because if they do, then they might take it to paper before I do, or something
Yeah,
like that. So it's
but why is that competition? Why do we have that competition in science? If we had an open collaboration, you wouldn't have. Is it human nature to want
I
to
think
publish before the next guy, or if you are working together, you're going to have the same results that might have a positive impact on society? Is that not good enough for the human
yeah,
for the human mind?
I think that it's all predicated just on, like, competition. Competition exists everywhere, whether it's, explicitly stated or implicitly portrayed, or, it's there's competition in the scientist who wants to figure out X first, right? Because they want to.
But
Now, they could collaborate with five other people,
I'm
but they
saying,
still
why is
want
that
to
good?
figure out X. I think it's just the evolution.
Why?
I think it's
Like
just
that's
based
just
off of who we are and coded to naturally be. We
okay.
are
So
encoded. Yeah.
I can agree with that. Yeah, no, I agree with that. I think evolutionarily,
Yeah.
I mean, we've always been in competition. That's the whole. That's what
Yeah.
kind of guarantees survival, or has in the past. So I agree with that.
Yeah. And I think we see it today. That's why that's why in politics they say you're fighting for your life, right? Like this next election, if we don't win, you're gonna die, or like your life is on the line here, or yeah, it's the same because they're trying to play on that inherent characteristic of I need to fight to stay alive, and if you're the obstacle or the thing that I need to fight to keep myself alive, then I'm gonna be full on. When in reality, that is you have a lot of other reasons to fight for your life, or make yourself feel like you have to fight for your life, other than that, right? Like you can. If you want that stress, if you really want that, let me tell you, there are a lot of better ways that you can make yourself stressed out about fighting for your life than somebody getting up on a stage and saying something.
Yeah, no, I agree.
That's why I hate this is the biggest election in the history, or
Every election, that's what
everything is, right? Every election's yeah.
So I'm gonna use that.
It's like why can't stuff just be normal?
I know. I want to use that as a way to segue into today's topic. I don't know. We can include this as
Yeah,
like a little intro
the prelude.
before we get
Yeah,
to the. As long as you're okay. I don't know if you want to give a quick
yeah. No,
introduction,
I'm okay with
and
that.
then
I'm okay.